Some stuff you'll need to build a PC is a case, a motherboard, a CPU cooler, thermal paste, RAM, an SSD or an HDD, a GPU, and a power supply. I've already went ahead and installed the power supply because this is a rebuild of an already built computer. Step 1 is to install your CPU into the motherboard. Be careful when handling the CPU because it's very fragile. You can do this by only picking it up by the edges. On the corner of your CPU, there's a small indicator that needs to be lined up with the indicator on the CPU socket that's on the motherboard. When putting the CPU into the socket, it should require minimal force. Just line it up and lightly drop it in. Maybe even give it a little nudge to make sure it's in place. Now just lower the bracket lever and lock it in place. For aftermarket coolers such as this one, there isn't going to be the same setup for each one and you will need to follow the manufacturer's instructions. I'm just going to be installing a simple bracket, radiator, fan, and applying thermal paste. Okay. Now before you put your heatsink on, you'll need to apply thermal paste on your CPU. I personally like to do a line down the middle for even spreading.
Want candy? Thing? Dark chocolate?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, no, actually, just once.
Now to install your RAM. We will be using two 8GB sticks for this computer. Near your RAM sockets, you will find a small key on the motherboard telling you where you should put your RAM first. Locate the spots they are supposed to go into, set them in, and press down until you hear both latches click. For this computer, we will be using an M.2 solid-state drive. To install the drive, all you need to do is slide it into the M.2 port on your motherboard and use the very tiny screw to keep it in place. We are almost finished building this computer. Now it's time to place the motherboard in the case and screw it down. When lowering the motherboard into the case, make sure to line up your rear I/O with the I/O shield. Lay the motherboard onto the screw sockets on the back of the case. Normally you wouldn't have all these connectors here, but I've left the power supply in the case for this rebuild. Once the motherboard is inside the case, do one last check to make sure everything is lined up properly. Then you can begin to screw it down.
Barack Obama is scared of me because I don't swallow knowledge and I spit it for free.
Now we move on to connecting all of the wires. Your case will have a set of wires that will need to be connected to the motherboard before anything else. The connectors and headers will both be labeled. All of these connectors will be labeled, but the front panel or JFP connector will need to be plugged in according to the legend on the motherboard. I'll put in an image of what it looks like on screen. Plug your CPU cooler fan into the CPU_fan header and your case fans into the SYS_fan headers. Once you've done this, you can install your power supply into the case and bring the required power cables to the front of the case. You will need at least an 8-pin CPU power connector, a 24-pin motherboard power connector, and a 6 to 8-pin PCIe power connector for your GPU. Make sure all of your connectors are fully seated to avoid any connection problems. Now it's time to install the GPU. Find the long PCIe connector on the motherboard and open the small plastic latch. Then place the GPU onto the slot and press down until the latch clicks. If you are using a Wi-Fi card, then simply slide it into one of the smaller slots below the GPU. Insert the PCIe power connector into the GPU power slot. Screw in the graphics card and Wi-Fi card with the given screws from your case. Now just put the side panel on and your PC is finished.